Okay, super. It's a pleasure to be here at the conference, and really a pleasure to follow distinguished speakers. I won't spend a lot of time talking about our kind of education and our curriculum, because I'm sure you are all much more expert than I am on that subject. What I will do is tell you just a little bit about our organization, what we do, and then spend the bulk of the time talking about the kind of challenges that we face in promoting access in education, and then just wrap up with a few observations. So Acumen Fund is a non-profit venture fund, and what that means is we don't make money out of our investments, yet we still make for-profit investments. So to explain the contradiction, we raise philanthropic capital that we use to invest in businesses that serve the poor. And our goal is to promote access to choice, focusing on dignity and accountability. And the logic is that by providing people with a product that they can purchase, there's a very tight correlation between the business that we support and the demand from the customer. And as the customer can choose whether or not to purchase our product, we're not only empowering the customer to articulate their preference for the product, but also making sure that the business is understanding and listening to our customer. So just briefly, we invest in agriculture, in healthcare, in housing, in energy, in water. We have about $75 million invested in 60-odd businesses in South Asia, India, Pakistan, and East Africa. Last year, we started a small investment program in affordable education, and the goal was to promote access to better education at an affordable price. Sustainability is a big part of this, of course, since our companies are for-profit. And so let me just dive into the few examples from our investments to just articulate our thought process. Apart from some of the most important questions like the quality of the entrepreneur, the mission fit, etc., there's 3 or 4 things that we really look for. One is who pays for the service. So who is our customer? The second is why should they pay for that service? The third is how do we deliver that service to them? And then the fourth is how do we scale that up? And so just to take each of these questions one by one, the first question in terms of who pays for our service, the natural response is that the student or the parent ought to pay for the service. Of course, very difficult at a low price point to encourage or to convince students to pay or parents to pay for our services. And so there's 2 or 3 categories of customers that we look at. The first is, of course, the student or the parent. The second, in the case of, let's say, skill development or vocational training, is the employer. So whoever the student is going to, if we're training a student to work somewhere, the employer that is recruiting that student is the one who might pay. And then the third is, let's say, a third party like the government or a CSR initiative by a corporate or someone else who is not affiliated and is not the user of the product itself. Now, this is important to understand for us because each of those customers has a very different mindset and very different needs from the product that we provide. So why they pay for the product, that is, what is the value proposition we're offering or our company is offering, changes based on the 3 customers that we have. So just to give you a quick example, we have a company called EduBridge Learning, which trains rural youth in villages in Maharashtra and Karnataka, soft skills and some industry familiarization for placement into entry-level jobs. So these are children who are between the age of 15 and 24. Average age is probably 18 or so, who are coming from families where parents are plumbers, electricians, haath gaadiwalas, bus conductors. Typically, the first formal kind of corporate job in the family is what these students are hoping to achieve. The training is about kind of 6 to 8 weeks long. There's attitude and personality development, as some of the speakers have mentioned earlier. soft skills training, as well as English and some industry familiarization based on what kind of corporation or job that student is going into. Student pays a small fee, and so the bulk of our marketing is directed at the student. The employer also pays a small fee for recruiting that student. But we found over time that it is in fact quite difficult to convince students and employers to pay for training or for recruiting incrementally skilled candidates. We're still trying to figure out why that is. Part of the reason is that employers feel they can kind of access such students on their own regardless, and they perhaps don't see the value in the students that we're providing, even though we have seen that retention of the students that we are providing is somewhat higher, given that the students are familiar with the job that they're going into and have some other alumni who are already in those jobs. And then the second is it's very difficult to collect the entire payment from the student, even if they have committed to pay it. And so we have also started to support corporations who already employ people, upskilling, as well as governments who have training programs. Now, those come with other challenges, as Ramji mentioned, in terms of securing the contract, in terms of securing the payment once the contract has been delivered against, without paying bribes or without leveraging influence. And so it's very important for us to understand, coming back to the original question, who our customer is and how they think. I think the topic of, or the idea of value proposition, or why our customer should pay, is also very important. I was in Pakistan last year speaking with one of our entrepreneurs called Mohammed Sufi Saab, who has a foundation in Hafsabad district in western Punjab. And they've been running 8 or 10 schools for the last 15 years, where their foundation sets up the school as well as pays for the first year's worth of teacher training for their teachers before they come into the school. So a very high focus on investing in the teacher before they teach. But uniquely, I found they were able to charge the students of the families in that district about 2,000 Pakistani rupees a month, which is about 1,000 or 1,200 Indian rupees a month, which I felt for a rural area was very, very high. Most of the private schools, at least that we've seen in rural areas here, are charging about 300 rupees a month. So 1,200 was very high, and I asked Sufi Saab, how is it that you are able to convince your parents to pay this much for your schools? And he said, well, it took us more than 10 years to do it, because when we first set up our school, parents had already tried public education and given up on it. They had already tried some form of private education and continued to give up on it, because the children who graduated from those private schools came out no different than the children who went to the public schools. And so parents began to believe that education itself was not something that empowered the child, and that there was no difference in quality between public or private education or any kind of education, but it was still something that you did because that's what society expected you to do. But it was only after about 10 years worth of education for the kids in these schools that these children went out, went to college, got jobs, started coming back. Some of them are even teaching in these schools, that the parents started to see that there was value to certain kinds of education, that you had to discern quality of education in a more sophisticated manner than you were doing earlier. We've also found this in one of our investments here in Karnataka called Hippocampus Learning Centers, where we provide preschool and after-school coaching for rural families and children in 2 districts in Karnataka, in Mandya and in Davangere. And so I'd asked one of the parents a couple of months ago why she sent her kids to our preschool. She had one child in our preschool, and the other child was already a little bit older, and therefore we couldn't make it to the cutoff for our preschool. And what she said was very interesting for me, which is that my older child at that age is able to kind of rattle off the entire alphabet: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O. But my younger child cannot. However, if you show my older child a shape, like the letter L, he's not able to identify what that shape is, whereas the younger one can. And that's the difference for me. At least she was saying that that was a difference for her in why she agreed to pay for sending her child to Hippocampus. Hippocampus charges about 2,500 rupees a year for preschool and about 1,200 rupees a year for after-school coaching. And so coming to the third section of what I want to talk about is how we deliver. You can see that at least in Hippocampus, we are strictly working in an unregulated area, so preschool and after-school coaching, because the challenges of working within RTE, particularly in these two districts, was too high for us. And so we're starting to deliver education outside of regulation at first. We have about 80 villages that we work in with 250 teachers and about 3,500 students. And we've experienced challenges outside of curriculum, which is, I think, probably for us the most fun, because that's where we can actually engage in education and what we want to do. And then, of course, the issue of assessment. So we're collecting sort of 3,000 pieces of data. I was talking with kind of Sridhar earlier, where we're trying to figure out a way to assess our kids' performance against some sort of generalizable data set that's available outside. But at 80 or 100 rupees a data point and about 200 rupees a month per child, the assessment itself becomes very, very expensive. So we're still struggling with how to figure out what kind of assessment to provide. And this year, I think we're going to at least have the ASER questions to be able to compare the performance of our children against the children in those two districts. So those are some of the challenges that we faced. Getting the nod here that I should wrap up. I think the 2 or 3 sort of biggest takeaways for us from our experience, and I like very much what Dr. Matthew showed up on the board earlier, the quote from Stenhouse on being very self-aware about what we do, where we fail, and learning from our being open to questioning what we do and then learning from our mistakes. And so that's something that we try to do very hard, is be very conscious about what we're doing, where we're failing, where things are not working, and then try to learn from our mistakes. And then the second thing is that we have to make kind of compromises all the time between quality and scale, between quality and operations, and even survive for long enough to build a platform that we can start to deliver better quality education in rural areas. And then I think the last one is that we have got to be sort of non-ideological about the problem and about the solutions. That it's really going to take more than just us to fix these problems. It's going to require working with the government, as we've experienced both bad and good. And when it's good, it can be great, and when it's bad, it can be really terrible. But it is really going to require working across ideological lines, across organizational lines, to fix these issues. So thanks very much for hearing me out, and